Hello, BookTube. Well, I've had a change of location. I'm out here in the front room. I'm actually at my desk. I don't know that you've ever seen my desk. This is my desk here. Here's my Lenovo ThinkPad with its rubber bumpers, and then there is the desk itself, which is it's just a battered, pitted, scarred old thing. So it has seen a lot of use. It was my father's before it was mine. And I'm out here to show you books. I originally had this space in this room was bookcases, and the desk was out in the kitchen. And then I had a change of heart and realized that maybe I would like the desk to be here, and maybe I could use it as another place to work. Frida is often very happy to just be off on her own somewhere else. She's often not, but she often is, and it's it was a pleasant thing. It was a pleasant thing that I had forgotten. I'd forgotten how much I liked working at a desk. So I brought the thing back out here, or rather I had muscular weightlifters too. I had muscular weightlifters bring the desk back out here, and I cleaned it as much as I could be cleaned. I've often thought about having this thing resurfaced, but I just maybe see what can be done about making the top of this look a little bit less World War I, but I've never got around to it. And then once I was done with that, there was the question of what to put on this desk, as opposed to having it empty, because only lunatics and imbeciles and the President of the United States make a fetish out of having a desk that's completely empty. And I'm not sure that he doesn't qualify for all of those categories. But what used to go here on this desk was, it used to be that this spot in between two bookmarks, or bookends, were my essential books. When I used to work at this desk all the time, and when I needed to, because I had a manual typewriter, and there was a sheet of clean paper here and a sheet of work, and there was a shelf of books right there in front of me that I actually needed because there was no internet. This is the library at Alexandria. This is 10 libraries at Alexandria, so I don't need that anymore. Once upon a time, I needed the Chambers Biographical Dictionary. I needed a really good, usually DK, illustrated encyclopedia, picture encyclopedia of how things work and what each part is called. I needed an actual one-volume encyclopedia. I needed the American Heritage Dictionary, the 4th edition. I needed a whole bunch of other things like that. Dictionaries of quotations, dictionaries of references, dictionaries of military battles, dictionaries of historical timelines. I still remember, I have a picture somewhere, a photograph, of one of the incarnations. That little library of essential books hardly changed at all, and I used the daylights out of them, just the daylights. I had a little dictionary, a little paperback thing that's probably 70 or 80 years old, that I just had on the desk. I didn't put it in the book row because it was for easy words that I often misspell, and then I had the bigger dictionary for other stuff, and that was what I put here to sort of give life to the top of the desk. But once I had the boys move the desk back in here, and once we cleaned it off as much as it could be cleaned off, the scars and the pitting isn't going anywhere unless I have it professionally done. I realized that I have no use for those books at all. And the idea, the way some Pretentosauruses do on Instagram or Bookstagram, have those books of reference there anyway, even though they don't ever use them, that is so repellent. So I had to figure out what to put there, and I haven't yet figured out what to do with that, with the perfect use of that space. Instead, what I temporarily did was just start to fill it with the books that I had reviewed so far this year. And I'm looking at that this morning here at this desk, and I'm realizing that it's a time capsule. It's not just a rank of books, it's also a time capsule of a previous world when I got finished copies in the mail and then reviewed them and then racked up the book. So I thought I'd show you them. And I have no idea. I'm sure that if I tried, I would fail to accurately name which venue any of these things were reviewed for. I write for a large number of places, but I want to show you, these are some of the books I've reviewed so far. In 2020, I have reviewed probably 100 ebooks that, of course, aren't here, and I've reviewed more printed books than are here. But I thought we'd go through these just for the fun of it because I'm at my desk. I won't be here for long because it's freezing cold here in Boston. And I don't know if you can tell from this video, but it's dark as twilight, and it has been for several days. And the weather forecasts say that this is going to hold true for the next 10 years. Chet and Bambi in the news studio say, yeah, you'd think it would be 10 hours or even 10 days, but no, our forecasts say 10 years. So it's freezing cold, it's dark, there are sheets of horizontally blown rain stalking up the street, just blown by 50-mile-an-hour winds. So it's. I took Frida outside this morning very briefly. She hated it, so did I, and it's the type of freezing, wildly blowing rain that's such that when you come back inside, every part of you is wet. It's not just that the top of your hat or parts of your face, all of you is wet because you have been in a car wash. So I can't stay at this desk. It's too cold to work out here. But I can stay long enough to show you these books, and especially since I'm not sure how many of them we will have seen or talked about on my channel. So the first one is by Keith Cooper. It's The Contact Paradox. And this is specifically comes down to one, I mean, it talks a lot about extraterrestrial life and the search for extraterrestrial life, but it boils down to one possible answer to Fermi's paradox of where are all the aliens? If the universe is billions of years old and has had billions and billions of planets that are capable of supporting life, as we now know, there are billions of planets in our galaxy alone, just in the Milky Way. They're in the perfect range and show the perfect atmospheric composition to have life. We don't know if they do or not, but that's billions in one galaxy, and the universe is billions and billions of years old. So Fermi and a bunch of other people have wanted to know for a long time, if that's true, where are the aliens? It shouldn't just be that the universe is teeming with life that we can see and that can find us, but it should have layers and layers of older life that's long gone. And there appears to be nothing like that. We appear to be the only life anywhere in the universe. And this book concentrates on one of those paradoxes, which is, what if that's intentional? What if that's exactly how things are? That the minute your civilization or your ability to express yourself to the wider universe reaches a certain point, you are eradicated. Or that maybe, as the author puts it, maybe it's not a good idea for us to be ceaselessly broadcasting our existence and our location out into the universe without knowing what's out there. Then the next book is Joanne McNeill. This is Lurking, a terrific book about online culture and what it's doing to us and where it comes from. Just first rate. And then, this next one is Gerald Posner. This is the author who did Case Closed, a big book about the Kennedy assassination. This is his book on Big Pharma. The history of it, the way that it's exponentially grown as it's gained political lobbying power. One particular family behind the American opioid crisis, but also the whole nature of the industry and how it lobbies doctors with billions of dollars in order to get malaise of various kinds, things that are just part of having the most complex brain on the planet, but they are not medical, to get them listed in a medical diagnosis manual so that they can then be prescribed drugs that are made by the companies that have lobbied to have them listed as illnesses in the first place. A perfect closed loop of quackery. So to the point where in most countries in the Western world now, if you wake up and you are not really, really, really happy, then you have been culturally conditioned to think there's probably something biomedically wrong with you and that you might need a drug for that. Because otherwise, why would I be suffering from not being really, really, really happy? And the same is true in the opposite. Because these drug companies have now trained society to think, well, if you wake up and you're really, really, really happy and you don't see any obvious reason for it, that's a medical condition too. And we've got a cure for that as well. It's an absolutely infuriating book. It's not Gerald Posner's fault. It's a great book as far as reporting goes, but it's infuriating to think that this stuff exists. Then we have Richard Frank. This is Tower of Skulls. First book in a trilogy of his about the Asia-Pacific War, wars between China and Japan, but also then between the Empire of Japan and the Allies in World War II. Great big thing, tremendously well done, tremendously. Can't wait for the other volumes. Then this is Nina Sankovich. This is American Rebels. She talks here about the Smith family that gave us Abigail Adams. She talks about the Adams family, mostly John Adams and Abigail Adams. She talks about John Hancock and his father and his grandfather, and also about the Quincy family. Josiah Quincy Jr. and a bunch of others. The Quincy family really stands out in this book. But the key is to show that these things were very intricately connected. These families all knew each other for generations, and then faced the idea of growing rebellion together. And like Tower of Skulls, it's really good at shifting from the broad scale, writing about the opening years of the American Revolution, and especially the years leading up to those opening years, the one after another incremental incursions on colonial life by the Crown of England. It does a really good job of writing about that on the broader scale, and then bringing it down to the personal, and then back out to the broader scale. Just a delightful thing. Then we have Karl Safina. This is an advanced copy. I don't know that I will ever get a finished copy of this book. This is Becoming Wild, where he writes about scarlet macaws, sperm whales, and chimpanzees, and how they communicate, how they make tools, how they make culture, how they make art, how they communicate. They transmit those things to the next generation, and why, and how the next generation innovates on them. It's called Becoming Wild because this is a book, like many of these authors' books, it's a book that recognizes the unbelievably crippling solipsism of calling this becoming human. The whole point of this book is that all of this long list of things that humans have forever said were their own sole domain are actually routinely done by many species on Earth, including almost all of the species who do these things are older than humans and have been doing this a lot longer. They just don't have hands. They just haven't created guns. That's all. And this is, I loved reading about this, loved learning all about it. I didn't know anything about scarlet macaws. They're intensely frightening. But the thing that I was reminded of when I was writing up this review, is how beautifully Karl Safina writes. Just beautifully. You know that it's a good sign when you're writing a book review and all you want to do is quote the book. That you know that is the kind of book that you can recommend to your readers without a single reservation. The struggle when you're writing that kind of review is not to quote from the book constantly, because you've got to get in your own 2 cents worth. But this is one of the only books. In fact, it is. Yeah, this is the only book on this shelf that is not a finished copy, because I got the advanced copy, and the book has it on sale date in April, and I don't think I'm ever going to get a finished copy in the mail. Okay. All right, this next one is The American People, Volume 2. This is The Brutality of Fact by Larry Kramer. That is our lovable author on the cover there, a great big thing. This is his continuation. The first book in this series was a kind of weird, wild, historical fiction, phantasmagorical retelling of American history that was just scabrous and dripping and brutal. Just an amazing book. I don't know who to recommend it to. I have no idea how to recommend that first volume. I thought it was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And I confess, when I was finished with it, the huge 4th of July fireworks of it, that's at once Michener-esque and Pynchon-esque at the same time. When I was finished that first book, I thought, well, okay, that was unbelievable. Who knows how long that was building inside you, but there's no way. You say this is part 1. There's no way you'll ever write part 2. And he did. And part 2 is, if anything, more impressive, because it's just AIDS. It's a historical novel, a weird, phantasmic, alternate historical novel about the AIDS era that nobody knows better than Larry Kramer. And it's just... It is so horrifying and terrifying and electrifying. Just an amazing, sustained fictional performance. And I was reading this. I read this 3 times. I read the Unbound Galley, then I read the advanced copy, then I read this finished copy. And the 3rd time through it, I was just struck with all sorts of really long, complex things that I can't say in a short review. I don't write long reviews, so I have to, for short reviews or a book like this, I just have to talk to the reader directly about whether or not this is an undertaking you will like. But I can't do it justice, because that would require 5,000 or 6,000 words. But the thing that I kept thinking when I was reading it wasn't very kind to most quote-unquote gay fiction in 2019, 2020. Most of it, when you read it against the backdrop of something like this, an original AIDS-era megawatt monster of a writer, then you just realize how absolutely gauzy thin most gay fiction is in the present day, and how opportunistic and fake it is. I thought it was great, but once again, the second volume, like the first one, I have no idea who to recommend it to. No idea at all. And that's very frustrating for me, because I'm not one of these artsy-fartsy critics who writes out for the muses on Helicon. I write book reviews specifically to tell people whether or not this is worth their time and money. I write about, all of my reviews are about recommendations, one way or another. So to read a book that I absolutely love, that I think is absolutely brilliant, and not to have any idea to recommend it to is a bit of a hardship. Okay, all right. Well, I didn't have this in mind. This is no. This was not a jab. This is by Douglas Stewart. This is Shuggie Bain, a novel about a working class 1980s Glasgow mother, who's also an alcoholic, a raging, out of control alcoholic, and her children, one of whom is a wounded and withdrawn artistic type, and then her daughter is, all the children are wounded, of course, because they have seen their mother in just horrible, embarrassing states of disrepair, where they needed to save her, and that ruins your childhood if that happens. If your parents aren't looking out for you, if you're looking out for them instead, then you come away from that with scars. And all of Agnes Bain's children have scars, and the title child, Shuggie Bain, is gay at a time and place where that absolutely could not happen, and does. And this is a beautifully written book. I do not mean to include it in the gauze thin stuff that I was talking about just a minute ago. This is actually a worthwhile thing, very much so. Some of the formulations here seemed a little bit easy to me, just a little bit easy, that we no sooner learn even the faintest hint that Shuggie Bain might be gay, and then we're flashing forward to a future in which he's living alone and seducing men for movie tickets or money or tins of sardines or whatever. It's like there's a pathology connected with being gay, with homosexuality, and that's largely unstated and that hangs around this thing, and that kind of bugged me. It's 2020. I would like to think that we would be moving well past the era in which gay fiction has to have pathology, in which it has to be either showing a pathology or trying hard to shrug off a pathology. It's not a pathology. It's not a mental illness. It's not illegal. And yet, what explains the gay fiction of Garth Greenwell other than pathology? What is there in those books other than pathology? For the narrator, or for whatever, rough trick he's turning in any particular book, you walk away from his books thinking one thing more than anything else, which is, God, I hope I never am gay. If that's what it's like, it's just a horrible, dark, unbalanced, unhealthy world. All of it is. So, and there's a lot of that in this. I don't mean to sell this book short, because I thought it was tremendously impressive, but much more as a family portrait than as any kind of commentary on Shuggie Bain's sexuality. Which I guess if you're gonna set your book in 1980s Glasgow in the poor end of town, then I guess the author is exploring the world he himself chose to create. I don't know. See what I mean? If I had 10,000 words to write about the thing, that I'm sure I could sit down and elaborate on what actually bugs me about it. But mostly I wasn't bugged by it. Mostly I thought it was brilliant. Okay, then we have history. This is Stephen Kershaw. This is The Enemies of Rome, in which he just goes through 700 years of Roman history and shows us all the famous people who fought against ancient Rome. It's not a study of how Romans looked at those beings. Instead, and it's not a study of, for instance, Roman colonialism. It's just vignettes, one chapter after another. So you get Hannibal, you get Mithridates, you get that sort of thing. And as that, it's really good. I really enjoyed it. Okay, here's another doorstop. This is House of Earth and Blood, Crescent City by Sarah Maas. This was billed as her first adult novel. It most certainly is not. It is certainly not an adult novel. This is a YA novel. But as a YA novel, I thought it was tremendously ambitious. Just really, really good. There were large parts of it that were very annoying, large parts of it that were lazy and on autopilot. If you've got, she was a best-selling YA author, she has millions of fans. That inculcates laziness in a writer. If you know that you don't have to work very hard, you won't work very hard, and you certainly don't want to turn those fans off. But given that, I enjoyed this more than I have any other book by her. And I thought, I just can't get over how beautiful the cover and the end papers are. This is just a gorgeously done production. Of course, that's another tip of the hat that this is not adult fiction, since adult fiction books don't look like this. This is, it's YA, and that bothered me just a bit, because I'm just a reviewer. I'm at the very end of the line as far as this book goes. The author had to write this book for months and months and months. Then that manuscript had to go to her editor and her friends, and then to her publisher, and the publisher's readers, and the sub-editors there. It had to go all the way to the marketing team. And every step along the way, every single person involved with this book had to say, okay, this is classic Sarah J. Maas. There's not a dull page anywhere in this book, but this is certainly YA. This is certainly not an adult novel. What are you people in marketing thinking, calling this an adult novel? Well, and then the people in marketing say, well, we got that directive from the author. She said this is her first adult novel because of all the F-bombs and all the drinking and drug use. And at no point did anybody in this process say, well, those things don't matter. This is still a YA novel. The whole fate of the world depends on which boy the girl... That kind of bugs me, because that is just false advertising. Any reader... Well, readers aren't in bookstores anymore. But any reader who picks this book up and sees Sarah J. Maas's adult debut, there are going to be plenty of those readers who are going to look at that and think, well, I know this author's a big deal in the YA world, but I don't like YA. So I'm glad this is an adult novel. I will gladly, now that I've read that on the dust jacket, I will gladly spend $30 on this hardcover. And it's not until they get maybe 30 pages in that they realize they were just lied to. That bugs me. Okay, then we have Laura Denardis. This is The Internet in Everything. Smart technology and the broader ramifications of smart technology. If you're wearing a Fitbit, one of those fitness trackers, it's tracking a lot more than just your steps, and so on and so forth. The traffic cameras on the streetlights where you live are filming everything. They're not just filming the street; they're filming everything. And who knows what happens to all of that information, where it all goes, who's brokering for it, what it's being used for. This book was really good along those lines, but even so, I think it only scratches the surface. Okay, then we have Calum Roberts. This is Reef Life. Beautifully illustrated. Look at the author's travels in the wilds of the world. Most especially looking at coral reefs and how climate change is killing them. They're bleaching and dying, and these are sometimes the constructions of millennia that are dying in the course of a year. So the author doesn't strike a doom and gloom note all throughout the book, but it's hard to walk away from it feeling optimistic. Then we have Adam Nicholson. This is The Making of Poetry, about Coleridge and the Wordsworths. Nice big thick thing. I don't particularly like the cover, but I thought this was terrific. One of the opening blast of a few different trips down Wordsworth Lane in 2020. 2 Wordsworth biographies coming out, plus this, and also a study of his poetry that was scheduled to come out in the fall. I don't know if it still will. This is the first of those, and Nicholson is really good. He's really enjoyable. I loved it. Oh, okay. Wow. All right. This next one needs no introduction. This is The Mirror and the Light, Hilary Mantel's third and concluding Cromwell novel in her Tudor fiction trilogy. I had a blast reading this. I thought it was just fantastic. Just fantastic. Talk about like the Larry Kramer. It's completely quotable. Or Karl Safina. This is another one of those books where all you want to do is just quote the book in your review. But you can't do that. So when I was working on my review, I had page after page of quotes. That's how I do my reviews. Is I type out the quotes first with the page number. Always remember the page number. Don't go. You'll be hunting forever if you don't do that. I type out the quotes in my open document first with the page numbers, and then I mull about which of them I want to use and what the shape of what I want to hit on, what notes I want to hit on, since I only have 700 or 800 words. And this was another case where I had a review that was 700 or 800 words long, and I had at least 5,000 words of quotes from this book. It's utterly ridiculous, but I did it anyway because once I started, I couldn't stop. I just thought it was fantastic, and I reviewed the first one of these. I read the excerpt in the TLS, I think it was, or the London Review of Books, and I thought it was incredibly impressive. I was keeping a literary blog at the time, Steve Reads, and I said on my blog that if the rest of the book is like this excerpt, it will be the best Tudor historical fiction that's ever been written. I was the first person anywhere in America to say that. And then the second book, Bring Up the Bodies, I reviewed for the Washington Post, for the Wall Street Journal, and praised it to the skies because I thought it was incredibly good. And then this one I reviewed for the Christian Science Monitor and praised it to the skies. So that I did my duty by this trilogy. We'll just have to see. We'll have to see what happens with the paperback when the paperback comes out, if it ever does. I'll have to see if I'm blurbed on it. What a thrill that would be if I was. Okay, all right. This is Phil Rucker and Carol Lenning. This is A Very Stable Genius, a Trump book. I am sort of halfway determined to review most, if not all, Trump books as they come out. I figure it's my price, the price I pay for ignoring the Obama administration for so long when I was writing reviews while Obama was in office. I shouldn't have been. I shouldn't have been doing that. So I thought I would write reviews for all of these things. And I reviewed this. If I remember correctly, I will try to find as many of these reviews as I can and leave them linked down below in case you want to read the whole thing. Needless to say, A Very Stable Genius was not good. Its two authors are respected, highly respected journalists, and they're also smart, capable people who had to realize at some point what they were strengthening by even writing a book like this. I'm sure that they consoled themselves by saying, no, we're doing a public service here. We need to write about these things. It's important that people know about them. But that isn't true. And you know perfectly, they're smart enough to know that they're not helping the public service. They're helping Donald Trump with things like this, but that's all right. This next one is little. This is These Fevered Days. This is Martha Ackman. This is her vignette by vignette study of Emily Dickinson. I wasn't expecting to like this anywhere near as much as I did. I thought it was really, really effective. Okay. This is Craig Furman, author-in-chief. This is his study of the U.S. presidents and the books they wrote. And I cannot recommend this book highly enough. It is so good, just so good. It does not whitewash anything. It doesn't include as many literary efforts as I would like. We read a book like this, especially if you know a lot about U.S. presidents, you're going to want the emphases to fall in different places than they do. But even so, oh man, if you are at all interested in U.S. presidents, this is a book. I mean, there's been a million books on U.S. presidents, but there's only a small shelf full of things you really have to have, and this is one of them. Oh my! So I strongly recommend it. Just a few more here, and then we'll be done. I didn't think this video would be this long. Get me talking about books. Okay, this next one is huge. This is The Napoleonic Wars by Alexander Mikaberidze. This is a great big thing that seeks to put the Napoleonic Wars in a broader global concept instead of just Waterloo, instead of just a tiny handful of battles. It attempts to show you that these wars are being fought everywhere, that there were ripple effects everywhere. It does a really, really good job. I don't have a whole lot of Napoleonic era warfare books, but this is one that I will keep. Then we have a tiny thing. This is Vivian Gornick, Unfinished Business. The notes of a chronic rereader, reconsiderations of stuff that she's read, reprints of essays about things that she's read. I don't know where these books are going to end up. All of them, most of them. I mean, the history books will probably end up across the room in the history section. Unfinished Business will end up in the little book room, in the bookcase about books and writing and that sort of thing, because it's just so charming. Okay, talk about charming. This is Phil Stamper's debut, The Gravity of Us, a YA novel about two boys who are the sons of members of an astronaut team who are tasked with going to Mars. And while that mission is being prepped and there's all sorts of press attention and whatnot, these boys are falling in love with each other. And that has gimmick stamped all over it, right? You just hearing that summary, you would probably think, oh, no. But this author handles it perfectly. Just handles it perfectly. I was swept away. I loved it. Okay, then we have. Okay, this is Constance Fenimore Wolfson. This is a Library of America volume of Constance Fenimore Wolfson, who is not known today, but who wrote short stories and whatnot, novels for a long time. She had a long and very prosperous career, and I'm kind of surprised that Library of America reprinted these. They did this, and they also did Robert Stone in another collected volume, roughly the same time. Robert Stone is fairly well known. He is now largely forgotten among readers, but bookish people will know, Dog Soldiers or whatnot. But Constance Fenimore Wolfson is completely forgotten, and this book kind of shows why. I mean, her stories have the fevered, melodramatic purple pitch of the turn of the 20th century. They have the constant fond look over the shoulder at the American Confederacy, at the American South during the Civil War and immediately after, and especially before the war. The American South, by intelligentsia in the American East, the Northeast, looked back around the turn of the 20th century, they looked back at pre-Civil War South as some sort of lost paradise. So ridiculous, so absolutely ridiculous. And it was everywhere. Everybody thought that way. Theodore Roosevelt used to get all misty-eyed about having Southern ancestors in his family tree. Just ridiculous. And all of his aides did as well. It was hardly anybody overlooked that particular sentimentality at the time. And these stories are full of that. And that makes it kind of surprising. I loved it. I loved rereading them. I loved reacquainting myself. I hadn't read anywhere near this much of this author. But it was still an odd choice. It was yet another book that makes me wish that I could corner the editor involved, the editor responsible at Library of America, and ask them tons of questions about what they determined. And then the last book. Then we'll do the last book of this little tour. Sorry this went on so long. And this is one of the first books. I think it might be the first book that I reviewed anywhere in 2020, and is one of the most impressive. This is The Essential Works of Thomas More. Huge thing, with double columns, footnotes at the bottom of every page, critical introductions to every major work. Just a sumptuous thing. So impressive that it had to go here. But I'm not sure that these things need to stay here. In fact, having them here, separate like this, calling back to a time that is gone, is a little bit depressing. I think maybe I might rather have something else here instead. So I might break this up. But for now, this is the way it looks. And you got through this whole video without any digging sound, because Her Majesty is over on the couch. Hey baby, how you doing? She's over on her pillow, so she's not bothering me. but that won't stay true. If I make videos on our bed, then she'll start making trouble. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I'm going to wrap this up for now. These are just some of the books that I reviewed this year. Some of you seem to like our tour of April's books over there, so I thought you might like this as well. But I will try to leave links down below, but I'm going to wrap this up for now. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.